they really need to get some pro players that understand this game fundamentally in their team who can explain this to them and make them understand it better. All right, let's watch this and react to this dev blog. Hold on.
Hello, everyone, and happy 2024. So today's Director's Take is going to be the first part in a series where we talk about our values and our goals for the coming year. And specifically,
this will be very important.
Piece, I want to talk about improving the core PvP experience of Overwatch. And even more specifically, I'd like to talk about improving the in-match experience of Overwatch. What actually happens inside of a game.
So this is super important because this is corporate speak of them acknowledging, in my opinion, that very clearly the ideas they put in the game weren't good enough and didn't work, right? And that's pretty, like, role passives didn't work. Like, they weren't fair. DPS has not had a passive for a fucking year. It's kind of embarrassing. And now that they're out of the wheelhouse of PvE and having to make that so much, right? It's really funny that finally people are starting to say, wait a minute, is this PvP better? And I think in general, a lot of there's this new format of PvP introduced so many more problems when it was supposed to be the solution, and it very clearly was not the solution. So let's see what their answers are.
Now, it might seem kind of obvious to say that Overwatch is a team-based, hero-based, competitive first-person shooter. And when your team is working together, when every player is utilizing a hero to the best of their ability, and that team is executing a strategy in order to win a match, the game feels really magical. There's really nothing else like it. And we'd like to facilitate teamwork as much as we can. And so...
Then why did you go to 5v5, man? The more I hear him say this, the more I think the game will go back to 6v6. He just described, like, 6v6 does what he just said better than 5v5 has. And that's really abundantly clear at this point. Clueless? I wouldn't say clueless. That's not necessarily what that means, right? What this means is that, and this gives me a lot of leeway to make a lot of arguments for 6v6. What he just said, Overwatch is better in 6v6 because it does what he just said better. There's more big team plays, there's more big playmaking, there's less denial abilities, and 6v6 allows that more. So I find it really interesting that he says that.
We'll talk about some of our thoughts around doing that in the Director's
Don't gaslight
Take
him
today.
for that. That's not fair.
Players aren't always acting in the best accordance or with what's best in mind for their team. And when they're not, sometimes that can be pretty frustrating. So we're also looking at ways
that's out of their control,
that
though.
Frustration, and maybe even giving players ways to operate without necessarily always depending on their team. We'll even go over a pretty juicy gameplay change that's coming in Season 9.
Ironically, if you want to give players more individual control over their game, the abilities in the game can't override everything, right? Especially if you're playing as DPS, right? So if you want players to have more player agency, you need to take strength out of the abilities that just override their skill no matter what, and actually allow them to, like, demonstrate their skill and be able to individually affect the match by not having abilities just override what they do. Because if you're a DPS player right now, and they have a Kiriko, and you have a Kiriko, and you go take the duel, and their Kiriko uses Suzu correctly, and your Kiriko doesn't, you just lose. There's no way for you to beat Suzu. You can't beat Suzu. It is an unbeatable ability, right? But this iteration of the game in Overwatch 2 has forced more of those abilities to exist, and they've actually doubled down on buffing abilities like that, aside from the big support nerfs that came out. Though I will say the Suzu change really changes that in general, because the Suzu change was a buff. So it's just really funny hearing them say these things about the game, but a lot of the things they implemented, at least last year, went against everything that they're saying here. So this means one of two things. Either one, they've recognized that what they've done the past year hasn't actually achieved what they're saying here, and they're saying this in anticipation of making big changes throughout this year, right? This year, 2024, will probably be do or die for Overwatch 2. You don't have the excuse of PvE anymore. People have started to realize, hey, is this PvP actually better? And it's on them to really make that happen. And they're starting out but with the new competitive system, because this one is fucking terrible, which is good that they're changing this, right? So I think best case scenario for this year, you start to see them go back to Overwatch 1. You see the core game get changed back to Overwatch 1, to where all you had to do was balance 4 characters and 4 fucking heroes to make the game enjoyable again, instead of reworking the entire damn game. So let's see what he says.
With the purpose of doing some of that. Now, we're also running different experiments to find ways of improving the game. We just launched
6v6 should be one of those experiments, by the way.
Which is a whole new set of changes coming to Quick Play just through this weekend, where we're doing exactly that. We're running a different set of rules for the game in order to find some ways that we could potentially improve it. Now, in future director's takes and subsequent ones, we're also going to be looking at some of the out-of-match experience and how we can improve that for Overwatch. Things like our competitive system, and game balance, also hero balance, also game modes and live events that we'll be running through the year. And I think I'd even like to get into a bit of some of our longer term thoughts on different systems that we think could potentially help the game, and maybe even like much bigger features that could be coming further in the future. Okay, thanks for watching. We'll see you in game.
I like Aaron. You know, he's a good dude, man. Like, I also don't think any of this mess is his fault, right? Which is why you haven't really seen me, like, talk about Aaron Keller and be like, man, I just don't like Aaron Keller, blah, blah, blah. I like Aaron. I think he just got flung into the mess. I don't think he was in charge of any of the places that made the game suffer. I don't think he, you know, I really do think Aaron deserves a chance to keep going, and I think that, you know, he's always been a pretty good dude. So let's take a look at this blog and see what they have to say here. So, hello everyone, and happy 2024. We're at the start of the new year, and I thought it'd be a great idea to talk about our view of 2024. This is a director's take. We'll be a part of a series. We frame up the year according to a set of values we're using to develop the game. These values translate into goals and specific additions and changes to the game. There's a lot of different things coming up this year and I want to share. So think of this as the first in a series of topics to cover. One of the biggest values of the Overwatch team is to constantly improve the core PvP game. That's funny. This is a broad topic spanning both in-game and out-of-game systems. Today, I'd like to look at where we're at with an actual in-match experience to moment-to-moment combat. I'll talk about what we think is working and what isn't working, and we go into some of the plans for the future. Additional director's takes in this series will look at systems surrounding the PvP experience, such as our competitive system, hero balance, and economy. I'll also take some time to look at the future events and limited time game modes, as well as larger systems that have the possibility of coming to the game. So, is this just a recap of what he said? Let's see. I'm trying to look for the juicy parts here. We're going to trim the fat. Overwatch team-based, hero-based competitive shooter. When a team work, dude, I cannot believe this. Makes me so, like, can I be honest here, guys? It infuriates me to read this. It infuriates me to read this because Overwatch 2's PvP destroyed this aspect of the game, right? This aspect of the game is undoubtedly worse in 5v5 and Overwatch 2. So if we don't see a limited time 6v6 mode from this new thing they're trying, I'd be shocked if they don't try it. I would be shocked if they don't try it. Absolutely shocked. It's just so funny that they're saying this because everything they've done in this game has diminished this, from harsher voice chat bans to making people not want to join voice to come together. They're redoing the competitive system, sure, but overall, I'm not even going to rant about 5v5 anymore. It's just, it's absurd. Okay, here we go. This is where it gets really interesting. Ready? In Season 9, both tank and damage heroes will get a modified, tuned-down version of the support healing passive. This should give non-support players more options in terms of sustaining themselves. It should also take some of the pressure off the support players to keep everyone alive, since individual players now have more control over their own health pool. In Overwatch, there's a constant tug-of-war between the power of a team and the power of an individual hero or player. A change like this shifts the balance a bit. This is something that we are constantly evaluating. We want Overwatch to be defined by team strategy and mechanics, but we feel this can be pulled back a bit now and possibly more in the future. Here's my concern, guys. Here's the reality. If you want Overwatch to be defined by team strategy and mechanics, adding things like the support passive and role passives in general, adding passive abilities that automatically do the heavy lifting of the teamwork for the players takes the game in the opposite direction of that, right? And this is what I feel like Team 4's biggest shortcoming has been. I'm trying not to gaslight him here, but you say one thing that you want something, and then what you implement into the game constantly does the opposite. If you want the game to be more reliant on teamwork and mechanics, you should remove all passive healing from heroes in general, aside from like Lucio Aura, right? Or like Break Pack, right? It baffles me to continue, and I'm really not trying to light them up here. It's just an observation that I've made. And when you go back and read all the claims they made about Overwatch 2's PvP in general, you see a lot of these things happen where they'll make a claim and it's like, well, this is actually completely wrong, right? So while if you're going to leave the passives in the game, DPS and tanks should get them too, right? DPS and tanks should heal passively if supports can too, right? It is an insanely strong mechanic that makes the game insane. What you're not noticing is that certain heroes are going to benefit much more from these passives than others, and there's no way to make them globally be fair for each character, which is why, in my opinion, I don't think that any role passive should not exist. They shouldn't exist, right? They should not exist. So what I'd ask Aaron, if I had the chance to talk to him, is I would say this: which one is it? Do you want the game to be more based on teamwork and mechanics, or do you not? Because you say here that you do. Would you not agree that letting players all passively heal as a collective takes away from teamwork, because players no longer have to work together to get things, which actually does the opposite of incentivizing them to work together? It makes them want to play more individually because they can heal on their own. They don't have to work with their team as much, right? So where's the magic here, right? You say at the top of this that you believe that a player using their hero to the fullest potential or relying on each other to execute a strategy makes the game feel magical. Then why have you guys continuously made Overwatch's PvP the opposite of this? Claiming you want players to have more agency, right? I'm just a little confused. And how do you think adding that passive to everybody instead of removing it from support, which would then help the tank players this doesn't actually help the tank players, which is the biggest problem in the game right now, is that tank is shit to play in 5v5 for a lot, right? So I don't know. I do like the idea of like random quick play modes coming up and temporary modes, but like this, again, I don't think they understand their game, and this kind of reaffirms my belief that they don't understand how implementing these things are going to affect the game before they do it, or even when they do it. So I don't know. I think Aaron's a great guy, but they really need to get some pro players that understand this game fundamentally in their team, who can explain this shit to them and make them understand it better, or play test it, or do something. It's absurd, because the constant contradictions in here for how things end up playing. And are we gonna how do we think Tracer with passive healing is broken? Tracer and Sombra with passive healing are gonna be so much better than literally every other character in the game, right? So it's just it's insane. It's insane. As a DPS player, going back to look for your supports to get healed is encourages teamwork and people working together. And this role passive does not, and role passives in general do not. So it's a little bit of I don't know. Let's see. At the bottom, apparently, we're actively looking for new ways to improve the core gameplay experience. We just launched our quick play hacked for the weekend, and there will be modified rules in effect to our quick play queues. This is the first. The first iteration is called Quicker Play, and it changes the many of Quick Play's rules to make matches quicker, payloads and capture points move faster, respawn times are quicker, and matches are shorter. This particular experiment is designed to look at how these changes affect player psychology. For instance, if a player spends less time waiting to respawn, will getting eliminated by an opponent be less frustrating? If matches are shorter, will each loss have the same sting that it currently does? There are also other out-of-game benefits that could come from this, as quicker matchmaking and quicker challenge competition. Based on the reception to these changes, the team may put some of them, make some of them permanent, or use them as the basis for other ideas to improve the game. That's what these quick play hacked events are designed to do, which are good, actually. Quicken the feedback loop and allow for swifter implementation of improvements to the game. In fact, we have one more coming later, Season 8. You can learn about quick play hacked here. That's it for this week. We'll see you in the game. I don't like this. I think it's going to feel like shit.